Aaron Swain, the Strategic Director of Digital Transformation for VMware. Aaron?
Pile in. All right, we have a large but very power-packed panel today. A lot of folks I've personally worked with, friends with a lot of them, and really excited for this topic that's been really near and dear to my heart over the last few years. You know, it's all about outcomes. I think you guys can hear me right with my mic? All right, awesome. You know, and you know, we're going to talk about continuous delivery, what that means, kind of how you measure it. But it's really just like it's part of the journey to get to the outcome. But before we start, I'd like to introduce our panel, and let's just dive right into it. So I'm going to throw a question out there. We'll pass the mics around, and how do you tell the difference between innovation and innovation theater? And maybe we'll start with Hannah, since you've got the mic in your hand.
All right, this is going to be a very spicy panel, I think. So for the spice-o-meter is up. I think innovation can be anything. It can be streamlining a process. It can be building a novel solution. It can be anything that drives change and drives betterment. You know, bureaucracy hacking is a great innovative method of finding different ways to utilize policy or laws to your advantage. Innovation theater looks like something that is short-term, that is shiny, but doesn't actually provide value. It definitely gets you the headlines. It definitely shows that you're doing good stuff, but there's no longevity there. You stick something, you put it on a shelf. You just wanted the headline. You didn't like your goal was not to make the lives of somebody better, the user experience better, but rather to demonstrate that you as an organization are good for this like period of time.
Great, thanks for that, Hannah. Maybe we'll go Carlo, since you're holding the next mic.
Cool. Hi, everybody. I'm Carlo Rye. I am the innovation strategy lead at Rise 8. It's a digital transformation consulting company startup. Before that, I was actually active duty. I just separated. I was at Kobayashi Maru, and then I also was part of the Kessel Run founding team. So what I think, you know, innovation at its core really is, it's pretty funny. I have innovation in my job title, but it could go a bunch of different ways. It could be very abstract, or it could be very concrete and defined. And I think you're going to hear a bunch of different definitions of innovation here. But to me, at least, I think innovation at its core is about creating and cultivating a culture and an environment focused on people that allows their ideas to become a reality. And I think maybe the best way to describe innovation theater is kind of defining the opposite and what is actual innovation. And I think innovation itself is like that reality that I mentioned is about actually solving a real problem for real users by delivering a real solution in a real and operational or production environment for them. And so I think the opposite of innovation theater is not doing that thing. Sorry, the innovation theater is not doing that thing. And that's kind of what I believe is like the definition of innovation, and how we combat innovation theaters actually by getting something into the user's hands, into production, and understand if we're actually delivering value to them.
Love it, love it. Enrique?
Yeah, hey, how's it going? Enrique Oti. I had the pleasure of working with Carlos. We were standing up Kessel Run, and actually Paul as well. So I worked with Kessel Run. I was at the Defense Innovation Unit. I'm now the CTO of a startup called Second Front. And we were actually trying to help bridge that valley of death of how do you take commercial technologies, really interesting commercial tech, and get into the government. How do you handle it? Really focus on the cybersecurity side of how do you get them past that valley of death of getting an authority to operate before their contract runs out. So that's really kind of our focus area. And so when I look at innovation, I'm actually not a fan of the word. I think it's because as in any bureaucracy, in anything, you get what you incentivize. And when you incentivize innovation, you get the flash, because everybody wants to say that they did something new or different or unique, and they want to get the press. They want the LinkedIn thing. They want the Twitter feed. They want the Air Force front page. What I really think we should be focusing on instead to avoid innovation theater, I think what the focus needs to be is entrepreneurship, which is the idea of, can you get an idea, find that product market fit, and then scale it in a manner that's sustainable because you're delivering value. So, the mission focus, it has to be mission focused. But unless it's sustainable and unless it's scalable, then it was kind of pointless to begin with. And this is one of the things when we first started Kessel Run, when Dr. Roper came in, that's what he told me in his office is, whatever you build at Kessel Run has to be repeatable. And not everything is, and we figured that early on, and we're still figuring that out, but there's a lot of stuff that we wrote policies to make it repeatable. real quick, one example of innovation theater, just because it's near and dear to my heart because it's like happening today. The idea of let's be really innovative and put companies under contract for something really innovative, but from day one have no path to production or transition. This happens all the time. And you can say it's innovation. Look, we put the coolest company under contract. Yeah, but if you know that they can't transition, what was the point? So again, it's about scalability and entrepreneurship more than just innovation. So that was a really long answer, sorry.
Awesome. Victoria.
Oh, hi, I'm Tori Vanek. I'm a CI/CD lead at Kessel Run. So I think I'll start with the innovation theater side. It's the buzzwords, right? It's the, we need this thing because other people have it. And so I think innovation, kind of what everyone else has said, can happen anywhere with, people who've been in government forever or who just started. So it's really having the leadership that supports the new ideas and gives you they take the heat and you get to do the stuff, but also to make it sustainable. So is it something that can, grow? Can it be used? Is it important to the mission?
Awesome. Thanks. And last but not least, Paul.
So my name is Paul Puckett. I'm the director of the Enterprise Cloud Management Agency at the United States Army. I would differentiate the two and kind of build on a few things that Enrique said is, to me, innovation is about finding the edges. Like we've said, it can happen in kind of any domain, but finding the edges of opportunity that hadn't been seen before, right? Like you're truly innovative about this thing. Like you've proven out that something is possible. And then where all innovation has to go is it has to at some point just simply become the way that we do business, right? And so I think it's really important for innovators to understand the business that they're in, because then you can actually start to apply this innovative thing that you've done into the actual business and becomes just the way that we have always done it, so that we leave room then for someone else to find the new edge, to be truly innovative in the market. I would agree with Enrique, like especially in the DoD, sometimes that's turning to policy, right? Of like, hey, this is a pathway. This is how it's done. Policy is a double-edged sword. And sometimes policy can be interpreted as just simply, these are the steps that I do to be innovative. And I think the people that turn it into innovation theater are the people that see the facade of the steps that it took to be innovative, but they truly don't understand the business that they're in. Or even if they understand the business that they're in, they don't actually convert this innovative thing into business value. And oftentimes it's why entrepreneurship like lands with me, is because you have to have a product market fit if you're actually going to capture a market. And so what I see in the DoD around innovation theater, and it's I think why we would tie this to continuous delivery, is, oh wait, I actually have to like field this to someone that actually derives value from it, or I'm doing all of the things, I'm using all of the buzzwords, like I'm going through all of the practices that are required for innovation or are enablers of innovation, but they fail to get that actual end product of this is the way we do business.
Awesome, Paul. So let's piggyback up, doing all the things a little bit. I think in 2018, the Defense Innovation Board published a guide to detecting agile BS, something I used when I was in government. I still use it today. In that guide, they provide some questions that you can kind of ask teams of, are they, truly agile? Are they doing the agile BS thing? Everyone talks about metrics these days. I'm just curious, when you look at a thing, how do you grade it? Like, that's BS. That's not the agile thing. Maybe we'll start with Paul, since you've got the mic in your hand.
I should have given away the microphone. Yeah, Hannah, you're right. This is going to be a 3 or 4 jalapeno spice panel. If you dive into what the DIB put out there, and shout out to Josh Marcuse because he is an awesome human being. Really, it was starting to poke at kind of the value stream, in my opinion. Like, are you finding that you are self-aggrandizing your role in the value stream vice like the actual value stream? And it starts to poke at different things around acquisitions. It starts to poke at different things around enterprise IT. It starts to poke at kind of each one of the components that are required in order to have like a complete value stream. But at the end of the day, like it's the tippy end of the value stream. For the Army, it's the soldier deriving value from software that differentiates the way that they fight on the battlefield. And the entire component, in my opinion, around Agile BS is starting to identify people that don't understand where they fall on the value stream. And really at the end of the day is, did it actually field capability to the soldier that differentiated on the battlefield or not? And if not, then you've got a choke point somewhere in that value stream, and it might just be you putting metrics out there that self-aggrandize your role. And maybe that's important in order to see your growth over time, but it's not the metric that matters, which is fielding capability that differentiates, your business. And in the DoD, that's fighting and winning wars.
Awesome. Tori.
I'm sure I'm going to oversimplify this, but like, are the products in production and are they being used by end users? And do they like them? Which is hard to measure, right? Like, it's, continually speaking to them, and are they being improved? So, also I find sometimes, things need to be shut down sometimes, and that's a hard conversation to have, right? Like, it's reached its, and there's nothing wrong with things ending, right? They've reached their end cycle, and, so how do we measure that? Like, if people aren't using it, or it's not valuable anymore, or something else has come along, like, are we comfortable enough to shut it down? Like, and so I think that's some of the agile, like, can we do that? Because that's part of our job, right?
I love that answer. Enrique.
Yeah, I think, so other than doing software, my background was in China. There's also this quote in the China community of the quality of a presentation on China is inversely proportional to the number of Sun Tzu quotes. So bottom line, if you're putting a bunch of Sun Tzu quotes in your thing, you're probably not a China expert. And I think the same thing goes in the DoD software. The more buzzwords you're using, probably starts to smell a lot like BS. And every buzzword that piles a little bit higher. And you see this, okay, so awesome. You stand up instead of sit down for your meetings in the morning. Okay, that doesn't make you agile. You say that you do sprints, you say you do DevOps. Like, there's a lot of words, and you start to feel it when you talk to people. And it's one of the things, like, once you're in the community, and this is the thing, like, that first time you ever push an app out into production to a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine that uses it, there's a really good feeling. And once you start doing that enough times, you start understanding what it takes to do it. And when you start talking to other people that are using the buzzwords, you can feel, after you become a little more experienced, you can feel where the BS starts piling up. And I think it really does come down to, at the end of it, probably humility of the people who are talking about themselves the most, the people that are espousing their processes the most. And many times there's some of the biggest BS. The people who are really doing the work are just delivering, and their customers speak for them. They do. When the user steps up and backs you saying, man, what I got, that thing was awesome, that's how you know you're doing it right. If your user's not backing you and you're the one who's saying how awesome you are, it's probably BS. Not that any of us have any seen that.
Wow. Carlo.
Sure. Yeah. Another take on it, I guess, as a core acquisitions officer, acquisition programs are being evaluated on all of the things. And I think what helped us, at least in Kobayashi Maru in Section 31, of trying to understand, what metrics matter, is really separating this understanding of software delivery and operations performance metrics. You as a acquisitions organization, how well are you actually, building and delivering and deploying software? But then mission metrics, like, what are you actually doing for the mission? How are you impacting the mission? And so oftentimes you'll see all of these programs will start to say, oh, like, this is the movement that's happening within the DoD. So, like, we need to go in this direction. And what they end up doing is we'll change one aspect of waterfall by saying we're going to bring in Agile, right? Or saying we're going to bring in TDD. But, like, does that really mean that you've now crossed the hump of I'm not doing Agile BS because I've implemented Agile in my development process? And, like, before you can even start to analyze you as an acquisitions office, how you are doing in delivering and building software, you have to understand, like, you have to get something out there first to know that you're impacting the mission. And so that just goes back to what Paul was talking about, is, like, the one metric that matters first is actually getting something out there into production and being able to measure value. Like, if that took you longer than what an Agile process could take, all right, that's fine. But, like, then that's when you go as an organization and understand, how do you evaluate your organization's processes and go and start to change and influence that. And, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to change, attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs overnight. It's going to take incremental change. And you'll be able to eventually get to that point where you can be a high-performing software organization while also delivering mission value. And so I think it's just important to be able to understand that there are two aspects to, like, metrics, at least in the DoD space, to understand, like, the impact that you have on the mission and your performance as an acquisition, IT organization.
Thanks, Carlo. Hannah.
I think there's a lot of lot of answers here. I'll take two. One is that if your organization doesn't practice psychological safety, it's very difficult to be an agile organization. If you have a leader who's directing you to do a thing, even though you don't think that thing is right, it doesn't provide psychological safety, because it's so important for teams to feel bought into the work that they're doing. I think I see that in a lot of different organizations that say, well, I had to go agile. I had to go do this, build this app this way. And we're like, well, did your users want it this way? Or was it because someone told you to? And oftentimes it's someone told me to. And I think we see that in the acquisition community, to Carlo's point about how contracts are written. Oftentimes it's very prescriptive on what needs to be delivered, how it needs to be delivered, how you're going to be tracked by how many lines of code you've written, like very, very waterfall methodologies, instead of allowing flexibility and modular contracting in your acquisition approach that allows all various vendors to come in to keep the government at the focus of it versus just outsourcing all of that to some scrum master at some company that may not ever meet the user because maybe the acquisition program didn't factor in sustainment and actually getting into production. Heard those horror stories too. So it's a lot of facets, and it's all easily mitigatable too. Like there's solutions to this.
Wow. So in my position at VMware, I get to see a lot of different programs that are out there. It's tough looking at some of these folks and programs that are out there because I feel like they're just stuck in this death spiral of innovation theater. For folks that have all deployed, capabilities into what I think is the hardest place in the planet, the DoD, what recommendations you guys have just to break this logjam of, organizations, teams, efforts, software? They're stuck in this cycle of innovation theater. And maybe we'll go with Enrique since you're holding the mic.
Wow, there's a couple things. So. The fun part about innovation, and I've talked to my peers about this back in the day, which was they put there hey, who's our innovator of the month? We used to have this at one of the organizations. And you see in there some random E3, some airman who came up with some really cool idea, and the colonel sitting there going, that was great. They really found a new way to do their job. And I'm looking at the colonel going, why did you have that policy in the first place? Why the hell would you force your airmen to have to innovate? Why wouldn't you just write a policy that makes them easier to do their job? They shouldn't have to work around things, and then you praise them for basically solving a job that they never should have had in the first place. So I think that's one of the, when you talk about how do we get people to do this right? How do we get away from the agile BS? It is all the policies and rules around the software development. Forget the software development. The developers are going to do their job. The PMs, the designers are going to do their job. It's all those rules around it. And I'll tackle one area, contracting. A couple reasons for this. One is myself, Tyler, Jason's in the room, Leah. We just published an article coming out 1 October, talking about the future of warfare. The key to the future of warfare is contracting officers. We actually wrote an entire article, never thought I'd ever do this, saying the key to everything is your contracts. And Carl addressed it, Hannah addressed it. If you can't write good contracts in the first place, it doesn't matter how good your developers are and how agile they want to be. If they're constrained by contracts about how they acquire the software they're using, if they're constrained by contracts about the networks that they're getting access to, contract about, oh, you can't buy a MacBook because somebody said you can't buy a MacBook. It really all comes down to high quality contracts. The facilities, I'm sure you guys had facilities discussions about Army Futures Command, how do you get a facility? It all comes down to contracting officers. So get to know your contracting officer, make sure they're innovative. That is the very, very first step for all agile stuff. And yeah.
Awesome. Carlo, how do you break the logjam, man?
I should really remember to pass the mic after I'm done and then get more time to think about what's going on. Yeah, so I think what's interesting about this logjam is these movements in the DoD, when you start to see these buzzwords, it moves really, really fast. And lots of organizations and teams and people